Good morning, fellow shit show junkies. Beautiful sunny day, blue sky, sun's beating down, got a fag, got a cup of coffee. Life is good. Anyway, morning video. What time is it? 20 past 10. It's very cold out there, so there ain't going to be any riding going on. I've been reading some posts on the group, and there's a whole bunch of stuff going on at the moment about Bike Awareness Week or month, or something to do with the old bill being out in force and focusing on bikers, because it's the start of the season and apparently guys that have had their bikes laid up all winter are bringing them out because it's sunny and it's warming up, and they're hooning off and they're rusty and they're crashing and dying and all kinds of fuckery going on. So the old bill get involved, biker awareness, they try and educate car drivers to keep an eye out for bikers, and they try and educate bikers to not be pricks, don't do this, don't do that, slow down, be sensible, stay safe, don't die, don't put others in danger, blah blah blah. All well and good, until you start seeing the stream of incidences where bikers are getting pulled over and done for having small number plates. And obviously you get a whole bunch of bikers cussing them off, calling them names, and you get a few sticking up for them. Oh, the poor policemen, they're only doing their job, leave them alone, stop giving them a hard time, stop calling them names, stop abusing them, you're a plonker, you're a knobhead, yeah, blah blah blah. Let's get into it. Where should we start? Okay, speeding. The laws against speeding. So you've got common law, which is about doing harm to people, and you've got statute law, which in large part deals with the potential of hurting people. So we can go into the arguments of that in another video. If you're speeding and you hurt nobody, you've caused no harm. You might say, well, why is speeding an offence? Well, it's to try and stop you from having an accident at a speed that is more likely to cause harm than if you were going slower. So there's a sense to it. There's a rational reason for it. Let's assume that you are speeding and you're caught. And you can demonstrate that you put nobody else at risk. So empty dual carriageway, you've been hooning down it at 110 miles an hour, not pointing any fingers, and you get pulled, and you explain to the officer that the only person I was putting at risk was myself, the road was empty. So the copper comes back with, yeah, but if you do come off, if say you have a tyre blowout and you come off and you get all smushed up, or worst outcome is you die, and the copper says, I now have to go around to your nearest and dearest, your family, your wife, whatever, and explain to them that you're dead. And that for me is a very traumatic experience. So he's got a good point. You can say, well, I pay my taxes and that's what I pay you to do on my behalf if that happens. Well, hang on a minute. If you pay somebody to come around and fix your pipes in your house, the plumber will do that for a sum of money, and he's not being traumatized, he's not being put at any kind of risk. So that's a straightforward, reasonable transaction. Can you argue that when you pay your taxes, which pays the wages of police officers, that them going to your nearest and dearest to explain to them that you've died in a road accident is simply a job that you've paid them to do? I would argue it's not. I would say there is a certain moral responsibility on the taxpayer to not inflict that heinous task on other human beings, be they police officers, doctors or whatever. So when you're doing 110 miles an hour down the dual carriageway, even though there's no other traffic around and the only person at risk is yourself, you are potentially risking a police officer having to be traumatised to go and explain to your nearest and dearest that you're dead because you had an accident at 110 miles an hour, wheeling or, I don't know, buggering about, being silly. It can happen. So Having covered that, you can see why there's an argument for a copper having powers to influence you not to speed on the public highway. If you're on a racetrack and you die, who would tell you your nearest and dearest that you were dead? I've no idea. But that's a completely different scenario. I'm not going to get into that one. We're talking about public roads and the old bill. Let's get now to number plates and sizes thereof. So the rules and regulations in the UK is that your number plate must be of a certain size, with the letters of a certain size, and the spacings between the letters and between the letters and the edges of the plate on which they're displayed must be a certain size. There's a reason for that specific sizing rules and regulations. It's so people can't muck about with it. If you had a rule that said all your number plates must be of a certain size, but there was no mention about the size of the text and numbers, the lettering, then people would take the piss with it. They'd have a plate that big, and then they'd have the letters and numbers like that in the middle. So that's the reason for the ruling, obviously. But motorbike number plates, we know they're too big. There's reasons why they can be considered to be too big. One is an aesthetic reason. They look ugly because they're too big in proportion to the size of the motorbike and its back tyre, etc. They don't look nice. And you could also argue that they create drag. So that the minimal amount of extra drag a large number plate causes on one single motorcycle is tiny. But if you multiply that by the hundreds of thousands of motorcycles, not just in one country but around the world, how many millions of gallons of extra fuel are being wasted because of that tiny amount of extra drag caused by a bigger plate? So for one bike, one owner, it doesn't make any difference, but over the resources of the entire planet, I would say it's a significant consideration. But that being that, we change our plate size for aesthetic reasons. We want to make our bikes look more beautiful, more aesthetically pleasing, so we put smaller plates on. Scientifically, or whatever way you want to put it, all of the technology that is used to look at, recognise, track vehicle number plates does not suffer any impediment whatsoever from a plate being that big or being that big. The human eye, I would say ditto. Trained police officer's eye. If a police officer wants to do you for speeding, they generally have to conform to certain guidelines, regulations in terms of their distance from you, the length of time they follow you, blah blah blah. All police vehicles have cameras. All coppers can see a number plate at a distance, be it that big or that big. So technically there is absolutely no rational reason why a number plate has to be that big instead of that big. The ANPR cameras can see the plate regardless of its size. If we're talking 7x5, which is the smallest that I've ever seen on a motorcycle, smaller than that would also look aesthetically unpleasing. Obviously the golden mean, the golden ratio, you know what size looks right on a motorcycle. Too small, it looks stupid. Too big, it looks stupid. It looks crap. Too small, crap. Too big, crap. So you find that 8x6, 7x5 is the sweet spot, and at that size all police enforcement technology can identify the lettering and the numbers. So given that reality, irrefutable fact, when a copper pulls you on your motorbike and issues you with £100 fine for having a plate that's too small, what's the reason? What's the purpose? Yeah, he's got the law on his side. He can say, it's in the rule book. You've contravened the rules, I'm entitled to give you £100 fine. Yeah, technically he's right. But realistically, is he not being a petty-minded Jobsworth wanker with no self-respect. Because let's be honest, any copper that pulls a stroke like that has got something wrong up here. They have discretionary powers. They don't have to nick you. They are allowed to give you a warning. And if I was a self-respecting copper and I pulled a guy on a bike for some reason and noticed he had a small number plate, I wouldn't give a flying fuck. And if I learned that he'd been warned previously, however many of times, I still wouldn't give a fuck. Because not only is he doing no harm, he's also, there's no potential to cause harm. It's an absolutely victimless crime. Nobody can be hurt, ever, in any way, shape or form. No way can the rider in any way, shape or form evade the consequences for speeding. Cameras will see the plate without any problems at all. Police vehicle cameras will see the plate without any trouble at all. And police officers' eyeballs will see the plate without any trouble at all. So there is absolutely no logical, rational, reasonable reason for a copper to give a rider of a bike with a small number plate a £100 fine. It is just cuntish behaviour. End of. And anybody who sticks up for a copper engaged in such egregiously out of order behaviour is a wanker as well. End of. And if anyone wants to say, well, they have to make a rule to a size, they have to pick a size, well, no, they don't have to pick one size. It would be no trouble at all for the DVLA or whoever it is that deals with the size of number plates, the regulations, to retext it, rejig it, and go, right, here's number plate, there's it's now, this is the size it has to be now, and that's the letter size it has to be now, and then do one that big, and then one that big, and the letters is the same. So rewrite the existing rules two extra times, or 3 extra times, and give riders a choice in number plate size. Why not? Why on earth not? Would it take somebody with some imagination or brains that works in some government office? Would it mean that they'd have to sit down and think and be sensible and be rational and helpful? God forbid. God forbid that any government official gives some government employee a little job to do that would make a lot of people's lives easier, safer and happier. God forbid that a government official stroke employee were to engage in such a pursuit. I mean, that's not what we pay our government officials for, is it? To try and make our lives easier and happier? No. I'm not sure what we pay them for, actually. We know what they actually do. They employ people to run around issuing £100 fines for causing no harm in any way, shape or form. Basically just for being Jobsworth wankers. On the flip side, there are shitloads of coppers who pull somebody for speeding. They see the plates too small, they don't give a fuck. That's because they've got self-respect. They're proper men and proper women. They don't engage in bullshit, tomfoolery, malarkey, chicken shit. They're bigger than that. It's the minority. You see the pictures of them, the videos. There's a whole bunch being posted on Facebook now. Some little Jobsworth copper, the guy standing there in his leathers and his helmet trying to be polite and pleasant and not fail the attitude test, despite the fact the copper's already writing the ticket. There's the copper. Yeah mate, your plate's too small. Yeah, I've got to give you £100 fine. I've got no choice. Well, you shouldn't be doing that. You know it's against the law. Whatever. You're a wanker. Anyway, thought I'd share that with you. Thanks for watching and listening, and hope to see you in the next one. Bye!